Hey everyone, welcome to another C++ video. Make sure to pay attention, take notes, and of course, master C++ with me. Let's quickly go over the solution to last week's challenge using the skeleton that was provided. So, first let's define these two integers. We see in these two integers. They'll be seen through the inputs, which we will put in using the test cases. And if a is less than 10, see out a is less than 10. So, if a less than 10, if b is greater than or equal to 10, see out b is greater than 9. So if b is greater than or equal to 10, and then finally, if b minus a is equal to 10, see out the difference is 10. So if b minus a equal 10. Okay, also, I forgot to add in and else, which let me do really quickly. And now we can test the code to see if it works according to the test cases, and you can compare your answers to see if you got them right. And yeah, let's get on to today's topic, which is for loops. So just a quick disclaimer that today's video is going to be slightly longer than usual, and that's because we have a lot of material to cover, and I'm really sorry about that. But on a happier note, although I'm a bit late, I'd like to say Happy New Year to everyone who is watching this video. So moving on from last week's discussion of if statements, let's go on to for loops. Now, if you have a sibling or like a parent or someone in the field of CS, you've probably heard of this term for loops. It's because it's really key to understanding the concepts of like computer science. So now let's talk about why we need it and how you implement it. So let's say someone tells you, I want you to find the sum of the first 50 numbers. Now, based on your current knowledge, your only method of doing this is int a is equal to 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus ... all the way to 50. Now, this is really unreasonable and it takes a really long time to write this out. Also, if the person goes,
haha, just kidding, I want you to find the sum of the first 100 numbers,
then you have to erase this semicolon and you have to go 51, 52, all the way to 100. Now that's just really unreasonable, and I don't think anyone's gonna have a good time writing that type of code. So the way that we would do this is by using a for loop. So the for loop is like represented by an integer, and let's say we have integer I. So the way that a for loop will do is I will first start at 1, then it'll go to 2, then it'll go to 3, then it'll go to 4, then 5, then 6, and so on. So that is how a for loop works, right? So what this will do is it'll go for every value between 1 and 100, I will become each one of those values. So how is this useful? So let's say we can have I at every single value, right? And let's say we have a value in sum is equal to 0. Now, for now, I'm just going to write for loop. Okay, right? And inside this for loop, we do sum is equal to sum plus I. So let me show you how this would work. So first time going through the for loop, I is equal to 1. So, and sum is 0, so sum will equal, let's draw a little chart here. So, okay, first time going through, I is 1, and sum is 0, right? So sum is equal to 0 plus 1, which is just 1. Then next time going through, we have I is 2, and so sum is equal to 1 plus 2, which is 3. Then next time through, I is 3, and sum is 3, so 3 plus 3 is 6. And we can keep going like this until we get to 100, right? But I think you get the idea, so I'm just going to leave it there. So now, how does this for loop work? So let me give an example. So we have I, and let's say we define int I is equal to 1, right? And I needs to increment, which means it needs to go up 1. Remember, in order to like add something to a number, right, we can do I plus equals 1. Right, in order to, so that's the same as writing I is equal to I plus 1. So it's the same thing as writing I is equal to I plus 1. However, still, people thought that this was way too long of a thing to write, since for loops are something that we use so often, and incrementing by only 1 is a very common practice. So instead of using I plus equals 1, there's another thing that you can use that is I plus plus. And what this allows is that this is the exact same thing as this, except it's just shorter. So we use I plus plus to increment. And also, we need to set a bound, because if we just leave it like this, I will just go forever and ever and ever, right? So our bound at the moment is going to be 100. So we can write I is less than or equal to 100. And if you remember from the if statement video where we talked about operators and things like that, we can also write I is less than 101. But I think for this case at least, it's more straightforward to use this. Okay, so how do we exactly write this in C++? This is kind of like a really basic outline, right? So there's a certain way you have to format it. So first, we use the keyword for, and then we use an open parentheses and a close parentheses, like let's put that there for now. And inside these parentheses is where these three things are gonna go. How we do this. So first we have to declare I. Like we have to say that it exists, right? So int I is equal to 1. In this case, remember it starts at 1. And at the end of each statement of for loop, you put a semicolon in order to signify that the statement's over, right? And it's all written in one line, so in order for the code to know that it's at the end of the statement, you have to put a semicolon. Int I is 1. Then after that, you write the Boolean expression, right? And in this case, if you remember, our Boolean expression is I is less than or equal to 100. So let's write that expression. I is less than or equal to 100. And I'm going to move over that bracket later. And then finally, we have to write I plus plus. Because remember, we have to increment I. So there we have it. There is like our for loop, right? There's our for statement. But all this is going to do is just going to set I to all these values, but it's not going to do anything. Remember, we have to add it to sum. So let's actually move this down a bit. And let's define a brand new int sum. And let's set its value to 0. Because right now the sum is 0. Now, what we can do with this is let's inside a for loop, in order to execute the statements like within the for loop, right? Similar to the ones you use when you're writing int main, you put brackets. See, so we can write, as you remember, sum is sum plus I, and in fact, we can just write sum plus equals I. And what this will do is this is the exact same thing as writing sum is equal to sum plus I. Same thing. And all this is going to do is, look, so whatever statements are inside these brackets, first of all, these statements are going to be executed this number of times, right? So every time you go through I, the statement's going to be executed. So if you remember, this is the exact thing that's going to happen when this code is run. It'll go from 1 to 100. And I believe the sum at the end of this should return 5,050. As far as I remember, that is the sum of the first 100 integers. So another thing we can do with this is we can make it more user-friendly. Like we can add an int n, and then we can cin n. Remember now, there's like the input section, and let's say the user put in 50 for the inputs, right? Now, right now, n isn't doing anything. So instead of putting 100 here, we can actually replace this with n. Now that we've put this in, our program will return the sum of the first n numbers. In this case, like 50 will be substituted here, right? So it'll return the sum of the first 50 numbers. So for today's challenge, you'll be given 10 numbers through the inputs, and if the number's even, you should add to your sum, and if it's odd, subtract from your sum. And for the bonus, you want to optimize it such that your code can allow as many inputs as the user would like. So the first number that they put will be the number of numbers to be summed, and the following n numbers will be the ones that are to be either added or subtracted based on if it's even or odd. Thanks for watching today's video. Make sure to check out the rest of the C++ playlist to continue to sharpen your computer science skills.